Today I'm going to be talking about important concepts, positions, amendments, and cases listed that impacted the American government and specifically the executive branch. First, I'll be talking about the 22nd Amendment. The 22nd Amendment limits the president to 2 four-year terms, or a total of 10 years in office. This was added to the Constitution because Franklin D. Roosevelt won a third term in office in 1940, and in 1944 he was elected to a fourth term. After FDR died in 1945, many Americans began to realize that having a president for so long was bad for the country. So this amendment, passed in 1947, limits the president's term of office. Next, the 25th Amendment provides the procedures for replacing the president or vice president in the event of death, removal, resignation, or incapacitation. This was passed after John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 to clearly define how to pass power to the vice president to avoid chaos. 8 vacancies for the president have occurred. 7 of those presidents died, and the last was Nixon, who resigned. The U.S. v. Nixon was a landmark United States Supreme Court case that ordered President Nixon to deliver tape recordings and other materials to a federal court district. President Nixon was impeached, but later pardoned. It was the first time a president was actually forced out of office. Next, I'll be talking about the cabinet's role, which is to advise the president on any subject he may require relating to the duties of each member's respective office. Some examples would be the Department of State, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Justice. Now I'm going to be talking about the process of electing officials at a federal level. For the president, during the general election, Americans go to their polling place to cast their votes for the president. To win the election, a candidate must receive a majority of electoral votes. In the event no candidate receives a majority, the House of Representatives chooses the president and the Senate chooses the vice president. For the vice president, they are indirectly elected together with the president to a 4-year term of office by the people of the United States through the Electoral College. The Electoral College consists of 538 electors. A majority of 270 electors is required. A majority of 270 electoral votes is required to elect the president. A state is allowed 1 voter for each member of House of Representatives, plus 2 for each senator. On January 6th, the electoral votes are cast and counted by the President of the Senate, and the President and Vice President are formally elected. A candidate must win a majority of electoral votes, which would be 270. California has the most electoral votes with 55. Texas is next with 36, and New York and Florida have 29 apiece. States like Utah have fewer people than states like California. If they only counted popular vote, then the people wouldn't be fully represented. Historical arguments for the Electoral College. First, the Founding Fathers designed the Electoral College system in the U.S. Constitution. Second, if the election were based on popular vote, it would be possible for a candidate to receive the highest number of popular votes without actually obtaining a majority. This happened with President Nixon in 1968 and President Nixon in 1992. When both men won the most electoral votes while receiving just 43% of the popular vote. The existence of the Electoral College precluded calls for recounts or demands for runoff elections. The executive office of the president is a group of agencies at the center of the executive branch of the United States federal government. The number of these positions was increased by FDR, and the EOP supports the work of the president. The president has many roles. First, he is the chief of state, which means he is the ceremonial head of the government and is the symbol of all people of the nation. Second, he's the chief executive, which means he has the executive power of the United States. Third, he's the chief administrator, or director of the United States government. Fourth, he is the chief diplomat, or the main architect of American foreign policy, and chief spokesperson to the rest of the world. Fifth, he is the commander-in-chief, which gives him complete control of the nation's armed forces. Sixth, he is the chief legislator, or the main architect of the nation's public policies. Seventh, he is the chief of party, or the acknowledged leader of the political party that controls the executive branch. Eighth, He is the chief citizen. The president is expected to be the representative of all people. The president has a system of checks and balances. The Congress or legislative branch keeps him accountable. For example, while FDR shifted the president's power from that of simply executing policy to making it, however, presidents still have a hard time getting Congress to pass their programs, especially during periods of divided government. The Supreme Court, judicial branch, also keeps the president accountable. Media and public opinion also influence the president's decisions. Roles of the vice president. The main role of the vice president is to step in if the president dies. And the only duty in the U.S. Constitution assigns the vice president to act as the presiding officer of the Senate. In the 2004 election results, Bush won 286 electoral college votes, while Kerry won 251 electoral college votes. We can analyze how these results were influenced by social, demographic, and regional characteristics. First, Americans are reluctant to vote out an incumbent president while war is being waged. This was after 9/11, when Bush had authorized the Iraq War to fight terrorism. The social reason that Bush won was that older Americans and military families would have been reluctant to trust a new, untried president with the risk of an ongoing war. Another social factor was that Bush appealed to Christian conservatives. Karl Rove and other Republicans arranged to have proposals on the ballots in many states to outlaw same-sex marriage. They spurred more political and religious conservatives to get out and vote against same-sex marriage, and while they were at it, to vote for Bush. The Democratic reason was that John Kerry was a representative of the young, idealist, intellectual viewpoint. He had served in the Vietnam War, but became a vocal opponent of it after it ended. John Kerry, an honorable man, made the mistake of thinking that the swift boat attacks on his service in Vietnam were so patently ridiculous that he didn't need to dignify them with an answer. What happened instead was that too many voters assumed that if he didn't refute the attacks, then they must be true. The regional reason Bush won is that people on the East and West Coasts are more liberal, and Kerry was an East Coast liberal who appealed to the liberals on both coasts. With his subtle intellectual arguments, what doomed Kerry was a history of flip-flopping. Kerry actually said of his support for the Iraq War, "I was for it before I was against it." I hope that this video has taught you more about the executive branch of the government and that you enjoyed watching. Thank you!